Somewhere in a fantasy world, the Demon King summoned his 4 generals. The first was Almandra, the Inferno Assailant. The second was Sylphid, the Mage of Storms. The third was Genome, the Earth Defender. For the 4th position, he decided to appoint someone from another world who would represent the water element, and thus he summoned a human named Uchimura, giving him the grand title of Overseas Manager. Uchimura was just a regular office worker back on Earth, the type who poured his soul into his job only to be constantly overlooked by his superiors. To make things worse, his managers eventually transferred him overseas to a dead-end branch where he had no proper staff, no equipment, and couldn't even speak the local language. Still, he worked hard and somehow the branch began to improve. Just when his bosses decided to dump him into another dead-end branch, Uchimura was questioning the meaning of his life when, of course, a woman on a scooter hit him and suddenly he was summoned into another world by the Demon King himself. The Demon King, who apparently had done a full background check, was impressed by Uchimura's record and asked him to join as one of the generals. He offered him an actual office, freedom to choose his subordinates, and even promised to send him back to Earth if he wished. The deal was better than anything Uchimura's past employers ever gave him. Still, haunted by the negative opinions of his old colleagues, Uchimura declined. The Demon King, however, told him not to let others' judgments cloud his own worth, insisting he saw potential in him. Almandra and the other generals weren't thrilled, so the Demon King proposed a test. Almandra assumed it would be combat and lunged at Uchimura, only to be stopped because, well, Uchimura had already fainted in fear. The king calmly revealed that Uchimura was just an ordinary human with no powers. For his first task, Uchimura was told to negotiate with Lord Terius, leader of the Minotaurs, a job at which Almandra had already failed spectacularly. Almandra escorted him there, and while he nervously tried to prepare, she boasted she would show him how it was done. Unfortunately, she turned out to be a terrible negotiator. Terius was ready to talk, but the moment Almandra stated her terms, he kept refusing, waving grass around like it was a business card. She gave up and shoved the task onto Uchimura. Panicking, Uchimura retreated into his imaginary bar, a mental safe space where he recalled similar work situations. Refreshed, he returned to the table. Almandra, checking in later, was stunned to find him calmly gathering the grass with a completely different expression than before. The next morning, she discovered Terius's room empty and grass scattered everywhere. Uchimura revealed that Terius had gone to the Demon King himself. Shocked, Almandra asked how he managed such a miracle in one night. Uchimura explained that the issue was simply miscommunication. After a night of talking and picking up basic Minotaur culture, he finalized the negotiations and secured the Minotaur's allegiance. He even revealed that back at his old job, he had faced similar clients who refused deals not because they weren't interested but because constant refusal was their way of bargaining. As for the grass, it turned out Minotaurs preferred it for sleeping instead of beds. With that cleared up, both Terius and Almandra resolved their misunderstandings. Impressed, the Demon King presented Uchimura with a bracelet symbolizing his acceptance as one of the Big Four. Even Almandra finally welcomed him as part of the team. The Demon King, perhaps a bit too optimistic, hoped that one day this ordinary human would be the one to unite all the demon forces, currently scattered and divided. Still getting used to the new world he'd been summoned to, Uchimura now had his own office. Deciding to get along with his fellow generals, he went to greet the other members of the Big Four. His visit to Sylphid ended quickly, as her assistant informed him she was currently outside. Just then, Almandra appeared and told him the Demon King was calling for him. The Demon King informed Uchimura that his next task was to negotiate with the Ogre tribes, explaining that to create a powerful army, cooperation from the demi-human tribes was essential, and the Ogres were the most influential of them all. Almandra agreed to accompany him on this mission. Wanting to prepare, Uchimura visited Genome to learn more, since she was also a demi-human. He found her in the middle of training her troops. Genome explained that the Ogres were strong, but she specifically warned him about their leader, Ogre, who was considered a dictator even by his own people. It also became quite obvious that Genome and Almandra didn't like each other very much. With that warning in mind, Uchimura set out with Almandra to negotiate a merger with the Ogre tribes. Upon arriving, they were forced to wait at the gates before finally meeting Ogre. Negotiations collapsed almost instantly when Ogre insulted the Demon King to Almandra's face, arrogantly claiming the king should surrender and serve under him instead. Almandra nearly exploded on the spot, but Uchimura managed to keep the peace and stall for time. He calmly pointed out that Ogre had no interest in negotiations from the start and was deliberately provoking Almandra so he could later blame her for the failure. When Almandra asked why Uchimura wasn't furious, he admitted he was, but showing anger would only give Ogre the excuse he wanted. While they considered their options, Ogre's daughter Orl approached them privately with a request to dethrone her father for the sake of her people. She showed them the tribe's food shelter, which was nearly empty. It had once been overflowing, but now resources were dwindling fast. Uchimura wasn't entirely surprised, having already noticed cracks in the soldiers' armor and even in the walls. He explained that such a decline often stemmed from rigid chains of command, something he'd seen ruin more than a few big companies back on Earth. Orl revealed that, while the ogres projected strength equal to the Demon King's forces, they were in fact destitute. She believed that joining the demon army was their only hope, but her father stubbornly refused, even while suffering from grave illness. Uchimura advised her not to reveal internal weaknesses so freely during negotiations, but Orl confessed she trusted him. Then, in an unexpected twist, she suddenly asked him to marry her so the ogres would have a leader to guide them to greatness. Almandra, clearly jealous, blocked the advance and declared they would think about it. Back at the Demon King's castle, Uchimura retreated into his imaginary bar to think. While his inner bartender and Almandra argued over who was more intimidating, a gorilla king or just a king, he came up with a plan. The next day, he told Almandra they would not visit Ogre directly but instead wait for him to make the first move. Sure enough, 1 week later, Ogre angrily summoned them after discovering smaller tribes were beginning to join the Demon King's forces. It turned out Uchimura had employed one of his old business strategies. Instead of wasting time getting kicked out by big companies, he used to sell products to small and mid-sized businesses until the big ones had no choice but to accept. Applying the same principle here, he and Orl negotiated with tribes that traded with the ogres and secured their allegiance first. Ogre protested, but Orl confronted her father with the truth about their situation. To preserve his pride, Uchimura proposed an alliance rather than a merger, allowing Ogre to remain the leader while still providing soldiers to the Demon King's army. Days later, Almandra informed Uchimura that the alliance was secured. He seemed puzzled, wondering aloud about the Demon King's earlier offer to let him choose his own subordinates. Almandra suggested picking randomly, but Uchimura admitted he preferred to have her as his partner, which left her uncharacteristically happy. The mood was quickly ruined when Orl showed up at the Demon King's castle as an emissary. Thanking Uchimura for his help, she eagerly agreed to become his official aide, much to Almandra's growing fury. Later, while Uchimura was working in his office, Orl arrived to report that she had completed negotiations with the Wyvern tribe and also informed him that the Demon Lord had announced a reward for his achievements, including the negotiations with the Ogre tribe. Uchimura was thrilled. After all, he had never received an award in his previous job, not even a thanks for working late sticker. Almandra then showed up with lunch, which was watery porridge he'd been living on. Though happy with his position, Uchimura quickly realized the demon army was still lacking in vital sectors, especially provisions. Wishing for something tastier, Uchimura half-jokingly wished for meat, and Almandra decided to take him hunting. On their foraging trip, she explained that the forest was filled with magical beasts and usually the nearby orcs were enough to handle them, but this time there was a stronger monster, which was why they had come. They gathered a few edible mushrooms before a giant boar suddenly appeared. Uchimura immediately dove behind a tree, while Almandra leapt into the fight. The boar's brute strength proved overwhelming, and it seemed her attacks weren't doing much. Watching from his hiding spot, Uchimura thought about how humans had always been outmatched by such creatures and had invented weapons like swords, spears, and guns to compensate, and then wondered why Almandra hadn't thought to bring any weapons at all. Finally, Almandra used her strengthening magic and managed to bring the boar down. They delivered the carcass to a nearby orc village, where the grateful villagers shared the meat with them. Almandra promised to cook, and Uchimura was excited at the thought of eating proper meat for the first time in this world. His excitement didn't last long. Almandra's idea of cooking was simply burning the meat with her magic until it resembled charcoal. Learning from the villagers that they couldn't afford salt or proper cooking supplies, Uchimura resorted to his trusty bachelor cooking skills, managing to make the meal edible. He even taught the villagers a few cooking tricks. Reflecting on the situation, he pointed out to Almandra that their nation was underdeveloped and poor, which explained their lack of resources. Almandra agreed but promised to work toward changing it in the future. Uchimura also learned more about the differences between demons and demi-humans. Demons could use magic, while demi-humans like Genome relied on training their bodies. Curious about Sylphid, he asked Almandra, but she admitted she didn't know much, since Sylphid rarely attended meetings. On the way back, Uchimura made the mistake of casually suggesting Almandra should wear something less revealing, thinking it would be more practical. Almandra, deeply offended, stormed ahead and left him behind. The next day, Uchimura told the Demon Lord he wanted to quit, still baffled about what exactly he'd said wrong. The Demon Lord, instead of letting him resign, suggested he make up with Almandra. While watching people in the streets, Uchimura opened a book and realized that demons wore light outfits as a symbol of pride and magical power. By suggesting Almandra cover up, he had essentially rejected her identity. His imaginary bar session, along with the Demon Lord's advice, made him realize he still had much to learn about this world. Meanwhile, Orel found Almandra sulking in a corner, lamenting that Uchimura never showed her any romantic attention. Orel explained that while demons saw revealing outfits as a symbol of pride, humans often saw the opposite, which helped Almandra realize her own misunderstanding. At the same time, Uchimura, lost in thought at his imaginary bar, noticed the bartender smiling knowingly. Taking it as a sign, he rushed to find Almandra. She too was searching for him. When they finally met, both awkwardly apologized for failing to understand each other. Later, in recognition of his success in strengthening the army, the Demon Lord awarded Uchimura a magic stone. Embarrassed, Uchimura refused to claim credit for himself and instead offered the stone to Almandra. Without realizing it, he had essentially made her a marriage proposal, something that left Almandra flustered beyond words. Unbeknownst to them, Sylphid's supposed assistant was watching closely from her room. The Demon King summons Uchimura, who thinks he has done something wrong and starts to apologize, but the Demon King instead says he is impressed with his work. He asks Uchimura about his opinion on this world's races. Uchimura replies that demons can use magic, while demi-humans feel inferior about it. The Demon King then assigns Uchimura the task of studying the differences between demons and demi-humans, particularly in regard to magic use, and asks him to develop a magic device that allows non-magic users to use magic. He also gives Uchimura a magic stone and instructs him to consult his fellow general, Sylphid. Back in his office, Uchimura asks Orel if she uses magic with the help of magic stones. Orel explains that yes, magic stones can allow them to use magic, but it also depends on the user's skill. With that, Uchimura decides to visit Sylphid. At Sylphid's office, her assistant Belinda answers the door and asks him to come back later when Sylphid returns. But Uchimura insists on talking to her. Watching secretly, Almandra thinks Uchimura is hitting on another woman. Belinda eventually lets him in, which makes Almandra even more suspicious. Inside, Uchimura quickly figures out that Belinda is actually Sylphid in disguise. He points out that her glasses are fake, that there is an army unit named Belinda, and that the Demon King already told him Sylphid works undercover. He asks her about the task, but she initially rejects him, saying she won't recreate something that already exists. Instead, she explains that she has been working on refined magical items using stones imbued with multiple spells. Uchimura is excited to mass-produce them, but she says they are too expensive for that. Uchimura then realizes his real task is to make them cost-effective. He proposes loading each stone with just one spell instead of many, making them cheaper to produce. An item can be created not only by adding features, but also by removing them, he says. Sylphid likes the idea, and Uchimura asks her to use the magic stone given by the Demon King. She takes him along, and after dragging him into an overnight shift, Sylphid synthesizes such a stone, which she calls Rosmarines. Uchimura is exhausted, so she allows him to take an hour's break. But when he opens the door, Almandra rushes in, demanding to know what he is doing with Belinda. Sylphid, still disguised in her armor, quickly says that Uchimura was with her the whole time and doesn't know anything about Belinda. Just then, Orel arrives with news that a horde of flightless birds has invaded the Demon King's lands, and she takes Almandra away to eliminate them. Sylphid also decides to test her new tool and has Uchimura try it against the birds. When they appear, Uchimura uses the new device to cast magic, and succeeds. He manages to kill some birds, but the stones burn out quickly when used for high-power attacks. Sylphid steps in to save Uchimura from danger and concludes that their test was a failure. Later, while having dinner with villagers, Uchimura learns that some demi-humans are not physically strong. Sylphid says they need to find a way to protect such people. She reveals that she comes from an elf merchant family and that, one day while wandering alone, she was saved by a poor demi-human family who lived in poverty. Wanting to repay them, she began her research. But eventually, she became too focused on the research itself and forgot her real purpose. She asks Uchimura to help her. Uchimura retreats to his imaginary bar and, after listening to Almandra there, gets an idea. The next day, he sets up all the stone devices on the ground. When the birds show up, he activates them. The devices emit a noise that the birds dislike, causing them to flee. Realizing their true potential, Uchimura repurposes the devices into monster-repelling barriers that use negligible power, achieving much greater success. Reporting this to the Demon King, Uchimura is praised for his creative solution. Sylphid also opens up to him about herself, improving their relationship. She even gifts him an improved magic stone device so that he can use magic himself. Later, Almandra visits Uchimura, but when she opens the door and sees him, she knocks him out cold. She wants to clarify that she doesn't think he is working with Sylphid, but unfortunately he is already unconscious on the floor and cannot hear her. Deciding to improve the demon army's condition, Uchimura visits the public market in the Demon King's capital with Almandra, who is wearing a new outfit. Uchimura compliments her. Earlier, Almandra had asked ORL for advice since Uchimura had invited her. Thinking it was a date, she wanted to wear something flashy, but ORL reminded her that Uchimura is human and suggested she wear something more modest. When Almandra asks Uchimura what they are going to do, he replies that they are going to probe the local economy and devise ways to improve it, much to Almandra's disappointment as she had been hoping for a date. They first visit a shop, where Uchimura learns that people recognize him. The shopkeeper shows him a set of golden cups for married couples. Uchimura instantly buys it. Almandra assumes he bought it for them, but Uchimura clarifies that it is only a sample. After visiting more shops and observing the market, Uchimura notices that due to recent negotiations, more races have joined the demon army, leading to more shops opening in the market. However, the increased population has also created food shortages. He also notices that food prices have been vastly inflated and determines that wholesalers distributing the farmers' produce to sellers must be driving up prices for profit. After completing his report, he asks Almandra what they should do next. Before she can answer, the genome interrupts. She tells them that today is Ria Day, a holiday among her people when they give gifts to loved ones. Just then, two desperate bakers approach the genome, asking for help to save their store. They sell a traditional confectionery named Kimozu, whose popularity has been declining, threatening their livelihood. They explained that a merchant had placed a huge order, and they prepared it all, but at the last moment, the merchant cancelled. With no other options, they are facing closure. The genome asks if Uchimura can help them. Uchimura samples the sweets and notices that they taste like mochi from his previous world. He also learns that most people who buy Kimozu are the elderly. Drawing on what he has learned about Ria Day from the genome, Uchimura begins promoting Kimozu using a story about two lovers sharing the confection. Soon the crowd grows interested and sales increase. Uchimura explains that it is a common method of increasing a product's popularity by tying it to a cultural tradition. Using the holiday's background story and adapting the Kimozu to a new customer base, Uchimura revitalizes the baker's sales. Eventually, everything is sold out and the bakers thank them for saving their store. They even gift Uchimura some Kimozu. Uchimura decides to share them with Almandra and also takes out the glass set for couples. Almandra thinks he is about to confess to her and asks what he will wish for, but as usual he only talks about work, leaving her disappointed. Later, Uchimura submits his report to the Demon King. During his investigation, he also discovered an unscrupulous merchant named Butigarian and learned about a wealthy neighboring nation called the Land of Gold. He suggests expanding commerce by opening a trade agreement with that nation. The Demon King agrees, offering the Rosmarin stones for trade, reasoning that it is gifted personnel who keep advancements alive, not the already made devices themselves. Uchimura is surprised since the demon army is the only one with these devices and they are vital. The Demon King explains that technology can be stolen, but talented personnel cannot. He also warns Uchimura about the King of the Land of Gold. After 4 months in this world, Uchimura is finally ready for his first foreign meeting. Almandra also wants to go, but he tells her the meeting is prearranged and that he will take care of it. Still, she warns him that the Rampage King has a short temper. Uchimura travels to the Land of Gold and receives an audience with the Rampage King. The king already knows about Uchimura and asks why he didn't come sooner to introduce himself. He then demands the real reason for the meeting. Uchimura presents him with a silver item, which the king instantly destroys, angrily asking how anyone could gift silver to the King of Gold. After experiencing the king's touchy temper firsthand, Uchimura instead offers the Rosmarin stones for trade. He explains that they are exclusive devices only the Demon King's army possesses, and that they are effective at keeping monsters away. He further suggests that if the king buys them, they could help keep golems out of his gold mines. The king likes the idea but wants to test it, so he releases his pet giant crocodile. Uchimura uses the Rosmarin stone to ward it off, but the crocodile turns toward the king. The king, however, easily subdues it himself. Impressed by both Uchimura and the device, he accepts the offer. The king asks how many stones can be delivered. Uchimura answers 200 in a month. Instead, the king demands they deliver them in just 1 week at nearly impossible quotas, though he pays them a huge amount of gold up front. Back home, Sylphid is furious that Uchimura accepted such an impossible task without considering the workers. Uchimura realizes this is similar to companies in his old world, which cared only about profit and ignored the strain on employees. To balance domestic needs and the king's order, he suggests prioritizing the border areas so they can at least meet the king's quota. Just then they receive yet another order for 100 rosmarin stones. To fulfill these demands, Uchimura pushes his organizational skills to the limit. Later, Orel asks him how he managed to deal with the Rampage King. Uchimura explains that he deliberately offered a low-value item first, then presented the real product, making the king think it was the best they had. And since the rosmarin stones had no set market price, the king paid an enormous amount to become the first to establish their value. Uchimura feels satisfied that everything is going smoothly. In his imaginary bar, as he drinks alone, the bar owner offers to accompany him, but just then his glass suddenly cracks. Later, he learns the Rampage King has abruptly cancelled his order because he is now getting the same stones at a vastly reduced price from a local merchant. This causes a sharp decline in trade revenues and morale across the Demon Kingdom, plunging Uchimura into guilt over what he sees as his failure. He goes to the Demon King and asks for punishment, but the king replies that anyone can make mistakes. The important thing is learning how to correct them. After this rebuke for giving up too easily, Uchimura decides to apologize to everyone. However, Genome says she is going to train, and Sylphid says she is busy reading. Dejected, he is then kidnapped by Almandra, who invites him to a dinner date. But their romantic mood is quickly spoiled by ORL. Nevertheless, their show of confidence in him restores Uchimura's spirit, and he resolves to investigate and fix the problem. Meanwhile, in the Land of Gold, the merchant who is selling rosmarin stones to the Rampage King at a cheaper price is revealed to be none other than Butigarian. Uchimura is planning to identify the root cause and remove it, but has no idea what to do next. In his imaginary bar, he suddenly gets an idea. He reasons that someone might have copied the rosmarin, but it would be impossible to mass-produce it in such a short time. Then he suspects someone is simply stealing it from them. Just then, news arrives that in some villages the devices have stopped working. Uchimura and Almandra go to check the villages, only to find that there are no rosmarins at all. They search more places but still find nothing. After some analysis, Uchimura figures out that the rosmarin stones being sold to the Land of Gold by another party are actually stolen from Demon Kingdom villages, where they were originally placed to protect crops. After returning to the castle, he devises a plan. Later at night, he checks on another village. Staking out an as-yet unaffected settlement, he catches the thieves in the act. Almandra beats them down and wants to capture them, but he lets them get away, because apparently chasing paperwork afterward is scarier than chasing thieves. Meanwhile, Butigarian pays another visit to the Rampage King and sells him another batch of rosmarin. The king praises him for mass-producing and selling at half price. Butigarian, a cunning merchant also known as the Prophet or Merchant of Death, had sensed the opportunity as soon as he heard about the demon army's new product. Unable to copy the technology, since none of his people were skilled enough, he chose the easier route, stealing from the demon army and reselling it to the Rampage King. But on his next visit, Butigarian is arrested at the gate and tried for his subterfuge. The king reveals that the most recent batch of rosmarin he sold was all fake. Butigarian is shocked and realizes too late that he has been caught in a trap. The king calls Uchimura as a material witness. Uchimura reveals that he had been receiving many theft reports, and to protect the villagers and devices, he set another trap by planting dummy stones. Now, with a smirk of victory, Uchimura asks Butigarian where he obtained those fake rosmarin. Caught red-handed, Butigarian immediately starts apologizing. He just wants to survive, no matter how humiliating the situation becomes. However, the Rampage King sentences him to death and throws him in front of his crocodile. Before the beast can kill him, Uchimura intervenes. The Rampage King is furious at Uchimura for opposing his decision, but Uchimura insists he did it to save the country. He explains that the orange powder required to extract pure gold can only be obtained through Butigarian, and if he dies, the supply will vanish. Uchimura pleads clemency, pointing out that Butigarian is a well-connected merchant capable of procuring rare supplies from nations that otherwise forbid trade, including the Land of Gold. The king demands to know why Uchimura is helping someone from another nation. Uchimura simply says it's only natural to help those in need. The Rampage King laughs and pardons Butigarian. Butigarian, shaken yet impressed, thinks Uchimura is brave for standing up to the Rampage King, but it turns out Uchimura was trembling the whole time. Later, Butigarian's children also arrive, and Uchimura reveals he has learned that the merchant has a large family of adopted children, all war orphans he has taken in. With that, Butigarian is granted permission to trade Rosemarin stones legally. Ashamed yet grateful, Butigarian discloses to Uchimura that something sinister is stirring within the Demon Kingdom's trading guild. With the prices of vital goods still soaring beyond the reach of ordinary people, the Demon King tasks Uchimura with finding a solution. Uchimura recalls Butigarian's warning and immediately suspects the trading guild is behind the crisis. At the same time, the Demon King sends Ulmandra north on another mission. Uchimura, determined to uncover the truth, decides to meet with the master of the trading guild. Sylphid, disguised as Belinda, insists on accompanying him. She mentions that since the guild office is run by elves, her presence will ensure smoother access. When they arrive at the guild, they are forced to wait for hours before the guild master finally appears. Uchimura is startled to learn that Sylphid and the guild master, Viper Lord Pent, are siblings, though Sylphid looks more ready to bite his head off than greet him. Uchimura politely requests a trade deal, but Viper smugly demands that he kneel before him. Uchimura kneels and grovels until Viper finally agrees, though only at outrageously inflated prices. After leaving the guild, Uchimura questions Sylphid about her family. She explains that the Lord Pent bloodline often interbred with other demi-human races due to the elves' notoriously low birth rates. She herself is half fairy and half elf, while Viper is half Naga. Sylphid further reveals that her relatives are vile and corrupt, known for burning elf villages and even selling their own kind. This was why she had severed all ties with them. As they discuss their next move, a young elf girl named Nia approaches them, claiming to have been Viper's slave before escaping in search of help. Uchimura, with his suspiciously soft spot for little girls, immediately buys her new clothes. Sylphid, side-eyeing the whole interaction, mutters that he's probably a lolicon. Nia then reveals that Viper has been spreading false rumors to inflate prices while secretly hoarding grain, releasing it in tiny amounts to maximize profit. When asked why no officials have raised objections, she explains that most of them are either Lord Pent loyalists or hopelessly corrupt. Realizing the trading guild has been completely hijacked, Uchimura uses his authority under the Demon King's army to order an emergency audit. However, the storage houses turn up empty, and the guild's records appear spotless. Viper smugly claims he already received orders and sold the remaining stock. Sylphid grows suspicious, theorizing that Viper might be conducting private trades directly under the Lord Pent family's banner. She also notes that Viper somehow knew about the audit in advance, suggesting someone close to them had betrayed their plans. The truth soon comes out. Nia herself had been planted as a mole by Viper, with her parents held hostage to ensure her compliance. He reluctantly reveals that the last remaining stockpile is being transported by horse-drawn carriages toward a frontier town. Later, reflecting on her miserable life, Nia recalls being taken from her branch family by Viper, who tortured her endlessly simply because she reminded him of Sylphid. Desperate to change her appearance, she even tried growing out her hair, but nothing stopped his cruelty. Eventually, Viper forced her to act as his spy. Meanwhile, Uchimura retreats into his imaginary bar, listening to his old colleagues grumble about their company's unfair treatment. Before he can drown too deep in nostalgia, Ulmandra drags him back to reality. She proudly announces her return from the north, where she claims to have single-handedly defeated 30 wyverns, going so far as to bring a few back as souvenirs for the Demon King. Uchimura, though half in awe and half wondering if she's secretly a dragon slayer in disguise, thanks and praises her. Then, inspired by her achievement, he comes up with a new plan to settle the issue once and for all. Uchimura calls Nia and the other generals into his office to discuss his plan. He explains that he wants to use smoked wyvern meat to solve the food shortage problem, though Sylphid quickly stops him from revealing too much about their distribution strategy. Nia, already feeling the weight of Sylphid's suspicion, tries to gather more details on her own, only to be caught red-handed by Sylphid. Forced into a corner, Nia flees and reports back to Viper. When she tells Viper that Uchimura plans to distribute food from the outskirts towns rather than the central ones, she slips in this small lie to spite him. However, Viper instantly sees through it, pointing out that Uchimura would never start with the outskirts since it's inefficient and costly. Coldly, he declares that Nia has outlived her usefulness as a spy and prepares to punish her. Meanwhile, back in the Demon Castle, Sylphid confronts Uchimura about Nia's betrayal. But Uchimura calmly reveals that he has known all along that Nia was spying for Viper under duress. He had noticed the marks of abuse on her body, which was why he bought her a new dress to begin with. To him, Nia was no different from his old colleagues, victims of power harassment and exploitation who still endured with forced smiles just to survive. When Sylphid asks what to do now that Viper knows of their plan, Uchimura simply assures her it will be fine. Trying to outmaneuver Uchimura, Viper orders his men to rush the hoarded grain into Demon Kingdom markets before the smoked wyvern meat can be distributed. The next morning, however, he is stunned when his men report that the demon army has already begun distributing grain rations ahead of him. Sylphid confronts her half-brother, smugly explaining that Uchimura secured the grain through newly forged contacts, offering wyvern meat in exchange. Startled at how Uchimura acquired such a massive supply so quickly, Viper hears Sylphid reveal the truth. She reveals that Uchimura has already been working on the issue and Uchimura had deliberately lowered his head to Viper earlier, ensuring that citizens received an instant supply of grain while his own planned stock was still en route. Viper tries to insist that Uchimura is no different from him, but Sylphid laughs it off, declaring that Uchimura is leagues above him and that everything unfolded exactly according to his design. Enraged, Viper orders his bodyguard to attack Sylphid before making a run for it. Unfortunately for the bodyguards, Sylphid unveils her new sword and promptly demonstrates just how sharp it is, dispatching them with ease. Meanwhile, Viper is cornered by Uchimura, who informs him that the other merchants have unanimously voted against him. He is no longer the guild master. Earlier, Uchimura had already rescued Nia, and with her testimony about Viper's ruthlessness, the merchants turned completely against him. Viper, realizing the tide has shifted, pretends to apologize, hoping Uchimura might spare him as he once spared Bugatarian. But when Uchimura remains unconvinced, Viper lashes out in desperation. Before he can do any real damage, Sylphid arrives and thoroughly beats him into submission. Viper is arrested, though not before warning Uchimura of an impending calamity. In the aftermath, Nia tearfully apologizes for her part and asks to be punished. Instead, Uchimura decides to bring her back to the castle. Having struck a deal with her father in exchange for delaying Viper's grain shipments, Uchimura formally adopts Nia into his team. For a moment, there is relief and even a hint of celebration. But that peace is short-lived. News soon arrives that a massive swarm of wyverns is descending upon the Demon Kingdom. Uchimura, his assistants, and Almandra travel to the Demon Fort, a frontline fortress directly in the path of the invading wyverns, while Sylphid heads elsewhere to gather intelligence. Along the way, Almandra recalls that calamities have happened before but admits this is her first time facing one herself. When they arrive at the fortress, they find Genome already defending it. She briefly praises Uchimura for solving the recent food crisis, but the words barely leave her lips before another wyvern attack begins. Uchimura immediately notices the tension simmering between the demon army's two main groups, the magic-using demons and the non-magical demi-humans. Despite the combined efforts of Almandra, Genome, and Uchimura's quick coordination, the attack leaves heavy injuries and casualties. Later, Genome meets with him privately and asks for his assessment. Uchimura bluntly concludes that the fortress won't fall because of the wyverns, but because the demons and demi-humans are too divided to fight together. He points out three key reasons. First, strategy. Demons, with their overwhelming power, focus too much on flashy attacks, while demi-humans excel at team coordination but lack raw destructive ability. Second, logistics. Demons consume huge amounts of rations to maintain their offensive strength, leaving demi-humans resentful of the imbalance. Third, history. Deep cultural rifts and old grudges make cooperation nearly impossible, and in times like this, such fractures could prove fatal. Genome acknowledges the truth of his words and asks for his solution. Uchimura admits it won't be easy to bridge such divides overnight, even in an emergency, but requests a map. Spotting an abandoned town nearby, he then visits it and decides to make use of it. He analyzes the situation but still worries about who should command the army. Genome assures him it will be fine. The next day, demons and demi-humans gather, and to his shock, Uchimura is announced as their new commander and hero. He had asked Genome who would take command, only to find that she had nominated him precisely because he is neither demon nor demi-human, and because the people already trust him as the hero who repeatedly saved them in past crises. Nervous but resolute, Uchimura delivers a speech, admitting that overcoming differences isn't easy, but reminding them all that their true priority is protecting their homes and loved ones. He then announces Operation Sword and Shield. Mixed units will be disbanded. Instead, the demons and demi-humans will fight separately but complement one another, like Sword and Shield. During the next attack, the plan works perfectly. The demi-humans, working in tight coordination, weaken the wyverns, while the demons wait in another position and swoop in for the finishing blows. The combined strategy significantly boosts their efficiency, and for once they repel the attack without any casualties. Later, while bathing, Almandra marvels at Uchimura's clever use of the abandoned city as a base. Oral slyly remarks that Uchimura has more plans for the city and is currently discussing them with Genome. Almandra, impatient, wants to run to him right away, but Oral reminds her to finish cleaning up first. Meanwhile, Uchimura strengthens the army's logistics by using the city as a new supply hub. Previously, rations were distributed equally to all fortresses, but he introduces a needs-based system, directing supplies where they are required most. Almandra eventually joins him, and both she and Genome praise his resourcefulness. Almandra then reveals she is returning to the demon castle to deliver a report. For a moment, Uchimura allows himself to relax, satisfied that things are finally going well. But his instincts nag at him. The Wyvern attacks are too coordinated, too unnatural. His fears prove true when news arrives that 2 other border fortresses are under sudden assault, while some Wyverns have broken off to attack the Demon Lord's castle itself. Almandra, who had just returned, is already fighting them alone. Uchimura rushes to her aid, only to arrive too late. Almandra had thrown everything she had into the fight, defeating the Wyverns but collapsing from her severe injuries. She lies unconscious as Uchimura finally reaches her. Nia later reports that Almandra is out of danger, though she needs plenty of rest after nearly exhausting all her magic. Relieved, Uchimura turns his attention to investigating the cause of the Wyvern attacks. Oral informs him that, according to Sylphid's reports, raids have struck multiple locations, including the Ogre's village, where some of Oral's close friends were injured. Uchimura grants Oral leave to check on her village while he resolves to continue the investigation alone. With his aides scattered across the land supervising defenses, and his mind weighed down by worry, Uchimura begins working himself to exhaustion. Even his imaginary bar, a place he always retreats to in his mind, starts fading. It takes a sharp rebuke from the Demon King to make him realize he is driving himself into the ground. After a proper night's rest, he regains clarity and calls Genome to share his solution, boldly naming it the Last Rebellion. His analysis reveals that the Wyvern's true objective isn't just random destruction. They are specifically targeting women, particularly demons. He recalls how, after one battle, women soldiers who returned to other fortresses were soon attacked again. From this, he devises a controversial strategy: use women soldiers as bait. Understandably, the women hesitate, fearful of what might happen if the plan fails. Addressing their doubts, Uchimura admits openly that he is no hero, not even a man of their world. He tells them that if they're waiting for some shining savior, they'll be disappointed. There is no hero, only themselves fighting to protect their homes and loved ones. His words ignite their morale, steeling them for the battle ahead. Privately, however, Uchimura confides to Genome that he is terrified. If the plan fails, lives will be lost, and the weight of that responsibility hangs heavy on him. Genome reassures him, steadying his resolve. When the next raid begins, the strategy unfolds as planned. Women soldiers are placed under heavy guard by the men, while Uchimura directs operations from above. The Wyverns swoop in, but the trap holds and the raid is successfully thwarted. Just as relief begins to set in, however, a massive Wyvern monster emerges, launching a furious assault on the fortress and even targeting Uchimura directly. Almandra, still recovering, throws herself into the fight, carefully rationing her strength. Genome and Sylphid join her, and together they manage to bring the beast down. Yet victory proves short-lived. Uchimura senses that such a coordinated calamity couldn't possibly end with mere Wyverns. His suspicions are confirmed when it is revealed that the Wyverns were only gathering food for a far greater threat, a gargantuan creature known simply as a Calamity. The monster rises and attacks with terrifying force. Just as despair threatens to take hold, the Demon King himself arrives. With overwhelming power, the king single-handedly slays the Calamity, ending the Wyvern incursions once and for all. Uchimura, awed by the king's sheer strength, announces their victory, rallying the battered but triumphant army. After the Calamity is finally vanquished, the kingdom turns its attention to rebuilding. The Demon King rewards his loyal generals for their efforts and later summons Uchimura for a private meeting. To Uchimura's shock, the Demon King announces his intention to make him the next ruler of the kingdom. Uchimura is dumbfounded, but the king explains that while Uchimura has exceeded every expectation, if he continues in his current mindset, he will remain nothing more than a talented slave. The king presses further, asking what is still holding him back despite his clear potential for greatness. Uchimura reacts with horror. He feels unworthy, haunted by the scars of his past life on Earth where his seniors constantly denied his abilities and crushed his self-esteem. He recalls the Demon King once saying that anyone powerful enough to defeat the Calamity could become king, even if they weren't fit to rule. But those who seize power without wisdom inevitably become tyrants and bring ruin to their people. Uchimura admits he dreams of building a kingdom not ruled by such hunger for power, yet he still lacks the confidence to accept the role himself. Granted time to think, he resolves to resign and return to the simple life of a salaryman. He begins preparing to hand over his duties to Oral and the others, even drafting his resignation. Oral and Nia quietly watch him with growing concern. Later, in his imaginary bar, Uchimura reflects on all the moments he's shared with his companions since arriving in this world. Even the bar itself, the place of his mental refuge, tells him it is closing, since he won't need it anymore. The next morning he sets out to say farewell. First, he visits Genome and finds demons and demi-humans training together. Genome explains that after their last battle, they chose to unite in order to grow stronger, thanking Uchimura for making such cooperation possible. Next, he visits Sylphid, who proudly reveals she is developing a new type of crop seed to prevent future food shortages, determined to repay the kindness once shown to her. She too thanks Uchimura for his support. Finally, he visits Almandra, who fumes that he saved her for last. He confides that the Demon King wants him to rule, but he doesn't know if he can. Almandra scolds him, saying his greatest weakness is trying to shoulder everything alone. She urges him to rely on his friends more and promises to stay by his side. Hearing her words, and remembering the gratitude of the others, Uchimura breaks down in tears. He realizes how much he has inspired them and finally accepts that he cannot run away. With renewed determination, he decides to face this responsibility head-on. He declares that he will become a king who does not stand above others by power alone. Turning to the Demon King and his companions, he asks for their support, which they gladly give. In the end, as preparations for Uchimura's coronation begin, Almandra brings out celebratory drinks, including a golden glass traditionally reserved for married couples, a gift Uchimura had once acquired. But when Uchimura casually reveals that he had already given one of the pair to the Demon King, Almandra's celebratory mood instantly shifts to outrage, leaving everyone else trying not to laugh at her fuming expression.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time, take care.